The mall, which was put forward as Maitland's major proposal for bicentennial funding, begins at the intersection of High Street and Charles Street and stretches through to St Andrew Street near the Belmore Bridge. The council is in the process of building the all-important distributor road to skirt around the proposed mall. This will not have to handle the volume of traffic that's currently using High Street, because by the time the mall is built, the Maitland bypass should be completed. The project is estimated to cost some $10 million and will launch the look of the city centre back into the 19th century. The Mayor of Maitland, Alderman Ken Guy, says the matter has to be brought back to the people at a public meeting on March 20th, before Council will make its final decision to support the concept.
I'm in favour of the project. It should most certainly increase employment opportunities for our young people in the city, and it also, I think, it'll bring tourism to Maitland.
The stoppage is indefinite, with a hearing listed in the Industrial Commission in Sydney in the morning. Unionists themselves don't plan to meet again until Friday morning to hear reports on that hearing, so there's little likelihood of steel production recommencing before the weekend. According to the FIA's Newcastle Assistant Secretary, Mr John Lee, discussions with the company over the new transport arrangements have been going on for some time, but the union this time will not bend.
Well, the situation has been that the workforce here at BHP has been reduced by 6,000 workers in the last 2 years, and we have looked at a situation of stability, and the workers have made a great deal of change. They've accepted manning cuts, job practice changes. However, on this occasion, a situation has arisen where the company has attempted to introduce a practice which will in turn take away ironworker jobs, and at the same time, by taking away those jobs, will give work to contractors. The workers have turned the other cheek on many occasions in the last 2 years. They've seen their fellow workmates retrenched, and also, as I've said before, they've seen a lot of changes. But on this occasion, they're taking a stand because they believe that the change that BHP is attempting to introduce, the work has to go on, but they're going to give the work to people other than BHP's direct employees. And
BHP says steel and ironmaking and production from the No. 2 Bloom mill have been affected by the stoppage, and unless the matter is resolved, stand-downs will occur within 24 to 48 hours.
Professor Spirit has written a book on open-air museums and has devoted a whole chapter to Newcastle. He says it's one of the best preserved cities in Australia, and its citizens should be proud of its history. Professor Spirit believes most people don't realise the richness of Newcastle's past.
Well, I think a museum that concentrated on the local history of Newcastle and the regional history would bring home to visitors from elsewhere in Australia, but particularly Sydney, which is probably a big potential tourist market for you, that there's a lot more here than just the steelworks. And it would give people a feel for the history of Newcastle. Enormous interest, I think, in the range of architecture you have here. Central Business District is phenomenally well preserved. Newcastle East is a delight to walk around. Much nicer in my view than the Rocks. You're much less likely to meet gangs of marauding drunken youths when you wander around Newcastle East. It's just a delightful area. And all up through King Edward Park, it's got a hell of a lot going for it. And a museum would bring home some of the historical interest.
The campaign against the proposed retail tax came to Newcastle yesterday with the director of the New South Wales Chamber of Manufacturers, Mr John Martin, addressing members on the issue. Mr Martin believes the new tax is almost certain and wants the abolition of payroll tax as a trade-off, a tax he says discourages employment. He says the retail tax will also destroy employment because it's an incentive not to buy.
The 10% retail tax is said to be levied on top of wholesale tax, and that is too much. And let me give you a real-world example. Manufacturers of television sets and radios are currently paying 32.5% sales tax, And if they've got to pay another 10% on top of that, or their goods have got to carry another 10%, that's too much weight in the saddlebag. It would affect manufacturing in those industries. It would threaten jobs in those industries. We're going to have bigger pay packets through tax cuts, but they will be at the expense of dearer goods. Now, for manufacturers, they've got to be certain that the extra money will come back to goods so that they can keep jobs up in their factories. And we have found in our economic research that because people have got more money, it doesn't necessarily mean that they spend it.
Gazettal of the Glenrock State Recreation Area is the very best method of protection
which
for
formed
the
its
total
demands to the
area. Our
state government
committee
at a
arose
public
out
meeting
of
last
the
night.
opposition.
Despite
to
some
the
government
commercial
moves towards creating the recreation area, Mr Gaudry believes public pressure must be kept up.
This group arose out of the proposed commercial development by the Caldwells, and at the public meeting the committee was given the go-ahead to seek ways to protect that area. And we feel that the Gazettal of the Glenrock State Recreation Area is the very best method of protection for the total area between Hickson Street and Dudley. And
You've already received assurances from the State Member for Charlestown, Mr Face, that the State Environment and Planning Minister is pushing ahead towards gazetting that area as a state recreation area. What more do you want?
Well, our committee would like direct negotiations with the relevant ministers. We feel that they should hear the voice of the people of the Merewether Coastal Protection Group, who are acting as an entity in the area for protection of the coastal land.
In the wake of last night's meeting of club members, there were a lot of people happy with the almost unanimous support shown for the club's board. The board sacked the 3 permanent bar staff on February the 15th, when they would not agree to a new roster, which would provide each of them with less weekend work. The roster meant less money for the bar staff and a saving for the club, which is in deep financial trouble. During the year to date, it has lost almost $17,000, and the club is being closely reviewed by the Registry of Cooperative Societies. Faced with closure, the club has so far ignored an Industrial Commission order to reinstate the 3 employees. It wants to man the bar with volunteers. For President Keith Noon, the choice is simple: cheaper bar staff or the club may close.
It will depend on the judge's decision at 10 o'clock in the morning. If he feels that the people have given us a sufficient mandate to run our own club the way they want it to be run, we will be asking him to rule that way.
But if he says that you must rehire that staff, you say that you can't run the club, it can't be financially viable. What situation are you in then?
Oh, we'll just have to wait and see. We're in a situation, a catch-22 situation, I guess.
Would the rehiring of those 3 permanent staff, if you're forced to do that, would that mean the end of the club?
That would again have to come back to the members of the special general meeting. They've clearly indicated tonight that they don't want them rehired.
So at the moment, the future of the club is still in the balance?
Most definitely.
Boating safety is a major issue at the moment for both government authorities and the public. The community discussion has been spurred on partly by the boating deaths of 5 people in the Lake Macquarie district over the last 18 months, and the tremendous cost of conducting search and rescue operations for missing yachtsmen. The large audience at last night's seminar was told the essentials of common sense voting by, amongst others, Sergeant Hilary Hanson of the Sydney Water Police. The other key speaker was Mr Haddon Spurgeon, a sea safety expert from the Federal Transport Department in Canberra, who is on a lecture tour of Newcastle and Sydney. He says the responsibility for safe voting is with the individual.
It's basically primarily the owner's, the individual's responsibility. He's the first, he's the skipper of the craft. When he goes out on the water, he is in charge and he carries the prime responsibility for getting things right as far as the water safety side is concerned.
You're involved in developing a sea safety program. What is that program trying to achieve?
Basically, it's trying to heighten public awareness of the need to observe basic rules in boating safety. Over the years, we've found this is necessary. Searches at sea, particularly at sea, can be very costly. An individual search, for example, which might go on for several days, can cost in the region of $500,000. So we're keen to cut that down, apart from, of course, the personal costs and loss of life, obviously.
There's been a favourite of the crowds at the Newcastle Show for several years, but this time around the Holden Precision Driving team is better than ever. In immaculate cars, they turned on an immaculate show, never putting a death-defying wheel right. When the collective confidence of the crowd had slowed down just a little, it was time for more cars. Beautifully restored vehicles from the NBN Car Club, this time not this one there. The occasion was the Newcastle Show West, which was judged some weeks ago. The 1985 showgirl was 20-year-old Amanda Wilson of Katara, who was an electrical engineer. She won the contest on the basis of her personality, knowledge of Australia, and interest in agriculture. Standing next to the 1984 showgirl Leanne Corner was this year's runner-up, Romaine Avery of Garden Suburbs. Believe it or not, she is only 18 years old. Amanda and Romaine will be kept busy for the rest of the show, attending official functions and flying the flags for show organisers.
A very well round applause. A man with people behind you over here.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Last week, as you recall, I was talking about the importance of providing for provisional tax, particularly if you're receiving investment income in excess of $999, and I related that, of course, to people retiring with lump sum superannuation payments and those who are living off the investment income that they are earning, certainly in the first year. But this morning, I want to talk about taxation from a different aspect, and I would like to give a very important message to the small employers of Australia, indeed the large employers of Australia, and including in that I mention the farmers. On the 14th of December 1984, a new tax rule came into force, and in simple language the rule means this: if you employ casual labour, and this could include shearers, etc., as the employer, it is your responsibility to ensure that tax is deducted at source. I repeat that. It is your responsibility as the employer to ensure that tax is deducted at source from the payment that you make to your casual employee, to the shearers, etc. It's not their responsibility alone. Now, if you don't do this, well then next year or the year after, or perhaps in 1988, you might receive, and I stress you might receive, an inquiry, we might call it a summons, from the tax department saying, you have failed to send us the appropriate tax paid on salaries and wages that you donated to your employees over the last 2 or 3 years. This being the case, you are not only liable to pay the tax to the tax department, you will also be liable for extra penalties. Now, I said I didn't want to overgeneralise, but I think it's a point that should be taken up with your accountant in no uncertain terms, with the tax department and with your employees, so that there are no misunderstandings. Remember, the responsibility is yours. I'll leave you with that thought, and I'll see you next Monday.
Novocastrians can't be wrong. That's how many people went to see the Newcastle Show over the last 5 days. Attendance figures were up some 15,000 on last year, but more importantly, the quality of exhibits and entries was even higher. VHP sponsored the show to mark their centenary and were honoured with the prize for best exhibit. There were record entries in goat judging. The wool-on show was said to be of the highest standard seen for some time, and a special showing of Murray grey cattle attracted 130 entries. Last night, balmy weather saw a record crowd turn out for the Family Sunday program, which featured the Warren Daily Big Band and, of course, spectacular fireworks.
It's been a terrific success all the way through. We've had beautiful weather right through the whole show. We had terrific attendances right through the show. Saturday being a little bit hot, but Saturday night was magnificent.
Today, the task of breaking camp and moving on was well in hand. It'll take 2 weeks until all is back to normal. For the next few days, a team of 20 men will clean the showground of the masses of rubbish which accumulate during any show. The good news is that exhibitors and Sideshow Alley will all be back bigger and brighter next year. The chairman of the committee, pressing for a new high-level bridge, Mr. George Keegan, says this highlights what his group has been saying all
along. The bridge down. It's quite ridiculous in this day and age that you'd find something so antiquated on the state's #1 highway.
And just how has your committee reacted to that incident?
Well, we had intended to send another telex to the Minister today requesting a meeting, and of course this only just made sure we did it now. And we've also feel so disappointed in our response from the Minister, we've sent a telex to the Premier as well, asking him if he'll intervene and help the Minister to see us as soon as he possibly can.
And just what is it you've asked the Minister to do?
Well, what we'd like to do, we haven't asked the Minister anything yet because he won't talk to us. What we'd like to do is to ask the Minister to reconsider the situation on the environmental and safety issues surrounding the Swansea Bridge. The environmental issues in the main, as you were well aware, is the Swansea township itself. The pollution from the vehicles going through there daily, noise and also the exhaust fumes is absolutely phenomenal and will not get any better. And of course the safety issue on that bridge was self-evident on Saturday afternoon's performance.
In what way? What do you mean by that?
Well, there's a gentleman in the ambulance who could have been heading for intensive care and might have been quite dangerous if he'd have been left there any longer. As it was, they had to carry him across in a stretcher and transfer him to another ambulance. It can easily be the other way too for boating traffic. That water's extremely dangerous there, and boats coming in and out of Swansea have got to negotiate that very, very fast water. And boating, as you know, is the fastest growing industry in the world today, and we're going to see more and more water activity. The philosophy around the world is you just don't mix vehicular traffic with boating traffic. You just build a bridge over waterways, and so they both travel freely and do their own thing.
The Cardiff factory was built in 1967, at a time when the Egg Marketing Board had a massive export trade through the port of Newcastle. That trade has now almost dried up.
At its height in the early 70s, the factory employed 55 people, but these days there were only 15 full-time workers and 4 casual. They stored grain and passengers, but most will lose their jobs. The Egg Corporation in Sydney has decided to sell the Cardiff premises by June and move to a smaller factory. There will be no grain or passengers, and the new plant will be mainly a distribution centre. They will be encouraged by the corporation to sell direct.
to the public in the hope that the NBN will be free.
Warm-up game against Sydney City Sonics just a couple of weeks away. Coach Graham Baker was pleased to accept the sponsorship check from Park Royal's Wrexham.
It's been good exposure.
An important part of their 85 season build-up.
Yes, Lee, we've worked very hard last year to maintain an image that is going to attract sponsors and the community to our games. And we feel that capturing the Park Royal is a real feather in our cap, and we hope to prove to the Park Royal that there's going to be money worth spent.
Graham, I guess it's frustrating from your point of view, but in another way gratifying to see players move from your ranks into the National League.
Well, certainly, Lee. This year we've lost Larry Davidson to the Falcons, Stuart McAway and Wayne Inglis, all players that did a very big job for us last year. All three of them were started for us at one time or another, and they've moved to the Falcons, the National League, and those holes are going to be hard to fill. But nevertheless, it's certainly gratifying to see those guys get a chance, and I think they're going to prove that they can do really well in that league.
Who have you got coming in to take their spots then?
Right, well, Buster Matheny, our Black American from last year, is returning, and a mate of his who lives just down the road, Greg Island, 6'6" guard, who will have probably playing forward for us, is coming with him. So that should hopefully fill a few holes for us. We've also got a few young players, young Alan Millwood from the Newcastle youth squad from last year, and also Peter Hogg. So it's looking good.